The two things that I think about when I think about Mintlify are one, all those features you mentioned, Han, like interactivity and being able to search things and all that kind of stuff. But two, it's also just like the developer friendliness of it, like being able to just like edit like a markdown file and then push it, and then I get like an update to my docs. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Highlight Podcast. My name is Jay, and I'm the CEO of Highlight.
And I'm Vadim, and I'm the CTO of Highlight.
And today we're talking to Han, the CEO of Mintlify, a dev tool startup building an easy, developer-friendly way to build and maintain your company's documentation. Han, welcome to the show. It's awesome to have you. I've heard a lot about Mintlify through Twitter, and since our early days of talking, I feel like y'all have gotten more and more popular, so I'm excited to dive into things. If you don't mind, maybe you start by introducing yourself, and then we can go into the journey of Mintlify.
Yeah, of course. First of all, thanks so much for having me on, Vadim and Jay. It's really nice to chat and honestly to for Jay to see you again. So I am Han, the co-founder and CEO of Mintlify. And would it be more helpful to talk a little bit about the story of Mintlify or about what we do or?
Yeah, for
That sounds
sure.
great.
Yeah,
Let's do it. Let's do it.
absolutely. So Mintlify as a company started at early of 22, at the very onset of the Winter 22 YC badge. It started as something that me and Hanbi, my co-founder, wanted to build because instead of choosing, like, let's say some people, a particular idea that they were suddenly inspired to work on, or something crazy like that, we just knew we wanted to build for developers. We worked on a company in the past, did a startup together, went through the entire life cycle, only to realize at the very end that we're like, I just don't give a shit about the people that we used to be building for. And it was like customer success managers. Not to say that customer success managers aren't cool.
Yeah, yeah.
They're awesome people. But it wasn't what got me excited to jump out of bed every morning. And when we started this company around, this time around, we knew that it would take a while, for you to build anything significant. And we knew the only advantage we had to that was to build for people that we cared about. And at the end of the day, we were like, duh, it's people like us, it's people that we've been our entire lives. It's people that we can relate to. And so we knew we wanted to build towards developers. And I think even more specifically to that, we wanted to build something that helped developers go figure out how to build something. I don't know if this was either intentional or it was something that came about, but I was always really interested in like education growing up because I feel like I took a very unconventional path to becoming a founder. And Hanbi, she worked at Duolingo and she was also like very interested in this ballpark as well. And so it kind of gets cultivated together into like this idea space of like developer education, if you will.
Makes sense.
And it didn't take a while until we got to what we're doing now. Pivoted about 8 times in the span of a year, which was just chewing glass throughout. And then eventually landed on building the Docs platform that,
Nice.
people know and love today.
Nice. Tell us about like your unconventional path to being a developer.
I never took school seriously. I was not the kid to have stellar grades and ever really cared about what was ever going on in class.
Okay.
Because ever since I was 13 years old, or sorry, 12 years old, I just started like I remember my parents got me one of the early MacBooks, and I remember discovering I think there's like stumbling into Xcode and then YouTube videos about Xcode, and I was like, oh my goodness, I can like go build mobile apps, and it was just such like this incredible kind of like spark in my eyes moment. I was like, this is so much fun, like I can go and build whatever the heck I can imagine and just like type with my 2 hands. And especially the very first app that got me into programming was like this mobile app for my middle school. I just like wanted to build something that I could show my friends and have them use, and it'd be something that's actually useful to them. And that just swung me into this world of like mobile app development, web development, And throughout like my time in high school, I'm sorry, middle school, high school, and college, I was just constantly building stuff. I was like, oh, this is so much fun. Completely ignored, you know, actual school in favor of this. And so, and I think it taught me everything that I know today by, you know, tinkering and figuring it out. I'm sure, Adim, I'm sure Jay, I'm sure you guys have something very similar to this as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. I feel like
Mhm.
that's a common founder mindset. It's just like
Yeah,
I'm gonna go do my own thing and figure it out. That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah,
So
yeah.
going into Mintlify then, Han, what was like the MVP of Mintlify? Like I mean, we're Vadim and I are actually very familiar with your product. We're looking at. I think
Yeah,
I've been asking you questions over the last couple of months and all that kind of fun stuff, right? But
yeah,
yeah, like what was the first version of it that kind of like
yeah,
got you to knowing that, hey, this
yeah.
is what we want to spend the next 2 years on or whatever.
And if it helps too, you mentioned pivoting 8 times. Kind of curious how you ended up landing on the Mintlify that is today.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, we tried a bunch of ideas in this general space of like how can we get developers to, you know, go and figure something out, and tried a bunch of different ideas. We tried something that was like initially when we did YC, it was like a very early AI like VS Code extension, and all it did
Oh,
was like you could highlight your code and right click on it, and it could like generate the doc strings for you. It
okay.
was the like this is actually before Copilot and ChatGPT took off.
But you were
And
using LLMs, like the early LLM stuff?
yeah, we were initially using the Codex model,
Oh, okay.
which some folks might remember. It came out in like I want to say 21.
Yep.
Hmm.
And then it was like, and I think they fully deprecated it since you can kind of tell how dated I am. But by dated in AI, it's like 2 years ago,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
um, but so we built that out, and I think it worked really well. It was like I think even to this day, it still has like I think like 30,000 monthly active users, something crazy like that. But it just we couldn't monetize it. We tried everything, it just didn't work. Maybe if I think, which is funny because there's startups doing this exact idea nowadays with much more success. Um, but it got us entrenched in like this something around like developer docs or something around like this developer communication space, as we called it.
Got it.
And we tinker around with all sorts of ideas. Could we like connect the code to your docs? Could we like, you know, find ways to give you updates to make sure you actually go update it? I'm sure that's a problem you've seen a highlight is like they go stale
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
quickly.
Oh
How
yeah.
can we make sure, you know, like analytics for docs, all of these different ideas. TLDR, a lot of them just were not great ideas. And I remember after our seventh pivot, this was actually after YC. This was like maybe almost a year after YC now. And I was in New York City at the time. I remember just being like, bro, like, nothing's working. Like we pivoted like, you know, like 7 times now, 5 of which was after YC even ended. And we raised our seed round at that point. How am I going to make this work? And I remember I went back just to kind of like the notes that we took by interviewing people while we were trying these other ideas and saw that this common trend of people who were like, oh, like maybe you can actually just do something with our docs itself. I've been using README, I've been using Gitbook, I've tried building it in house, and like there were all these different things that didn't make it as ideal
Yeah.
for others. And we're just like, sure, let's give it a try. The entire time people were saying it when we were pivoting other ideas, we just kept ignoring it. We're like, no, that's no way. Like, I don't know if I even believe that. You know what I mean? Like, I think just build it in house. You know, go with this. You know, like, you know, or like open source framework, or use one of these existing 5 options. And so we weren't sold on the idea initially, to be completely honest with you, which is, by the way, not something I usually tell people,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
especially not our investors. But we actually weren't sure. It didn't come so naturally to us. But at the seventh pivot, we were just our hands were in the air. We're like, honestly, like let's just try it. You know, like I don't know, I don't like the other ideas that didn't work. The ones that we thought made so much sense, no one wanted. Let's just give it a try. And so the MVP of what Mintlify was today was literally a weekend. I literally remember it was Saturday, Sunday, and I think a little bit of Monday. I just went to my roommate at the time, who was another YC company. He just had like these really shitty docs for their developer product, and I was like, bro, let me just build you like the docs that I wish I always it came with like these, really like gorgeous API references. It came with search out of the box that actually worked really well. But it was really fundamentally just a static web page, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so we just spun this together and just be like, hey, dude, here it is. Do you want it or not? But if you say yes, by the way, I will go to your DNS and actually switch it so it's it's using this. He was like, sure. And so I literally remember I like went on his laptop, switched the DNS record so it was like docs dot, and it was his company at the time.
Nice.
And after I think a week, it just like it was really well received amongst customers. You started getting compliments on the docs, and like the team started loving it. And they were like, "This is actually really incredible. Like SEO so much better. All of these different things." And we're like, "Oh, maybe there's something here." Posted about YC community, and then I think over the first week, like got 10 customers
Wow.
right off the bat.
Wow.
All from people who were like, "Hey, I think this is super cool. Can I use it?" And then I think from that point on, it just really, carried through and all the way till now we work with like, 3,000 companies. And so it's been quite the journey from that point on. So,
The
but
docs are
the
such a
earliest that
ubiquitous problem for every development organization. Every software company needs some sort of documentation. Curious to hear your thoughts on why you think it is so hard for companies to build their own docs.
yeah. First of all, I want to say I think highlights docs are fantastic. Like I really think you guys did an incredibly awesome job. And for frankly for folks like you, I would never even try to like think that we're a better option. I think it
Oh, thank you. But we would
building it
like
in
to
house.
think otherwise. There's a lot of things we can improve. So
Well,
There
well,
is.
well. Then let me ask you guys this: like, how was the experience building in house? And it could be great, but maybe you guys tell me.
yeah. Well, I think the maintenance burden is one thing that we really think of a lot now. Having to maintain performance, and there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to building docs, and kind of why I'm asking this question. We've thought a lot about SEO problems and things like Google Ads maybe being negatively impacted by us not following best practices. So really curious to hear more about what you've learned having spent so much time in this space.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it perfectly.
Hmm.
Which is to make like docs really great. There's a lot more that I think people meet than it meets the eye, as it turns out.
Hmm.
And this actually wasn't something that we thought was the case when we started. Was like, oh, it's just a static website, right? As it turns out, you have to build all the interactive components to make it good. If you're building API docs, something that actually picks up the open API specs and actually spins up these API stuff. Nowadays, the standard is you want those APIs to be interactive. You want to have good search out of the box. Nowadays, you want AI chat as part of the doc experience as well. You want to have good SEO. You want the docs to look nice, and you want to have high performance. And then there's like a list of 10 other things, right? That
Hmm.
actually come together to make a really great docs
Yeah.
come together outside of even just the content, right? Like, not to mention
Yeah.
the actual content itself. And building that and the maintenance of that over time is usually not the top priority for any company.
Hmm.
And so we've kind of come in to be like, hey, instead of focusing on that work, just focus on the content. That's already hard enough, like just getting docs up to date is like, it's such a challenge for most startups. Let us worry about the rest. And
Yeah.
I think from that is kind of how the angle in which people see us.
The two things that I think about when I think about Mintlify are one, all those features you mentioned, Han, like interactivity and being able to search things and all that kind of stuff. Um, but two, it's also just like the developer friendliness of it, like being able to just like edit like a markdown file and then push it, and then I get like an update to my docs because I can do it like alongside the code I'm working on. And that's actually something when we built our docs, we really indexed on, right? It's like
Yeah.
all these other offerings like README and things like that. You can't really do that, and so that's why we decided to build it because Mintlify didn't exist at the time, you know. So I guess one, like, what is your reaction to that? But two, are there other things that you kind of when you pitch to new customers, you think about when you think about like how you differentiate against those other like few companies that also are like static site doc type generator folks?
Yeah. So for first of all, I think like when Hanbi and I set out to build what Mintlify is today, I think we just started with such a simple premise. We were like, let's just build the thing that we always wish we had, right? Like wish we had the solution that just would have worked for us.
Yep.
And that insight just came from us thinking about all the projects that we worked on together that had docs, and there was like many of them, from open source projects to other startups that just, like that had exposed some APIs. And we're like, yeah, like we never really stuck around with any of the thing we tried. Like we tried DocuStorage, we tried all these other options. It's like more the platforms. We tried these different open source frameworks. None of them just really stuck.
Yeah.
And we highlighted the reasons why that was, just listed them out, and then just kind of tackled this like solution that we think that would, again, just would have been the thing that we just really wanted. And it was exactly like you mentioned, and had all of these different features and components. It was just stunning out of the box, really just high quality, and met that kind of like Stripe level, like developer docs experience that the bar is at nowadays for every company, and something that was so developer friendly, that was just like built for developers by developers, and really took that approach and just kind of ran with it. And of course, stroke of luck would have it, other people wanted that too.
Speaking of storing the docs, as you onboarded these customers, did you encounter a lot of friction with folks migrating their existing docs into Mintlify? Were there any learnings there that you could share with us?
Yes, that was the biggest thing actually. So basically, using a product like ours is kind of requires a bit of activation energy, if you will. And so, sometimes you might be like, hey, I actually think the platform is better, but oh man, I have so much of my docs already in this platform. And so it kind of like, if you were like, it just looks like in like high school chemistry, it's like this kind of like graph of activation energy. We always felt like the migration's a little bit of the little bump. And what we do to this is we've actually completely just been like, hey, what if that bump doesn't exist? And what we did for that was like, hey, what if we just help migrate it for you? How would that look? Imagine you don't have to go through the migration. We just cover it all for you, regardless of whatever plan you're on or, you want to use with us.
Did that mean, was this all like one-off working with these customers, or did this turn into some integrations with whatever storage they had?
It turned into all sorts of automations and an entire kind of like, scripting and team built around this entirely. And I think as we scale, it's only going to get more robust with more, software, but also, more team members on this as well. But it's like a very crucial part of our, customer acquisition strategy in general.
Very cool. Very cool. And Han, what do you call folks that work on that? Are they like solutions folks? Like, I imagine early on it was you, but like, what will you call those folks? It's because it's kind of cool, right? You're working with customers to get on the platform. Yeah. We actually don't think we've ever had a really well-defined name for this particular role. We're just at a point where we're starting to build out a team around this. Okay.
And so far, it's like, I think it's been something along the lines of like, it's a migration specialist, an onboarding specialist.
Nice.
It's like an ops person generally. But I'm sure this will evolve over time to being something, more robust. But
got it.
We just see it as a thing to do to get a customer. And so,
makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah. And speaking of some of that, like AI, some of the AI benefits that you were considering when you were starting Mintlify, have you seen any benefit to using AI for migration of existing docs, whether it's rewriting the format from Markdown to Mintlify's format or anything along those lines?
Yes. Yes. The issue with it, though, is from my experience, at least what I'm seeing so far, is that consistency kind of matters for us, and like making sure it's one-to-one. So let me put this in the example. Let's imagine if you guys, were to work with us. And by the way, don't recommend. I think you guys have great docs. Like, would you feel comfortable if, I don't know, let's say 5% of the content actually is just hallucinated, from that? How would you feel?
Right. It's not what anyone would want, probably.
Yeah. And so we do have parts of it that actually uses AI even in the process right now, but for the most part, we actually prefer the more mundane scrapers just to ensure the reliability that can prefer. But this is more of nuance in terms of, and I'm sure the models are gonna get better too. So
Sure.
in time, I'm sure this will change. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Very cool. Han, I'm curious, like beyond search, are there
Yeah.
any other AI things y'all are thinking about building
Yeah.
to like augment an existing like documentation site?
Yeah. So for starters, I'm a very strong believer that um, it's funny because after building DocWriter, which was the AI based native product, and we swung very heavily into just being a SaaS platform, we were like, I'm not touching AI. you know, we were like, we just want to be a platform because we think AI has all of these challenges.
And what's
And
DocWriter? Well, DocWriter was
oh,
the
sorry, DocWriter was the automated
doc string
um,
thing.
the doc string idea. Yeah.
Understood. Understood.
Mm.
Um, and so actually, I don't know if you can send a link here, but I'll just for references, I just sent it over.
Cool.
Uh, essentially, um, like basically we decided to focus on the platform. And then as we kind of built platform and AI kind of got more advanced and we started experimenting with all sorts of different things that we kind of do with it, and started integrating more and more of this into our product, our core realization is that like just like how Stripe raised the bar for developer experience using Stripe docs in the 2010s, this decade will see a completely different bar as well because of AI augmentation with the way developers learn. A very, very simple fact to this, right? Like think about who is even using Stack Overflow compared to ChatGPT nowadays,
Mm.
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like the days of kind of just browsing through paragraphs, a wall of text is kind of over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like you can kind of already see the writings on the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from a company who's kind of building these docs and having AI as part of the feature, one of the things that we're starting to see is like the ratio of people who are using chat to someone who just jumped into the docs and are actually reading it is going up by the month, disproportionately to any other feature.
Yeah.
So as the models get better, you're coming into a docs knowing exactly kind of like getting an exact answer by asking a question instead of going through and trying to find a link and like traverse through the set of things
Mm.
to kind of get to it. It feels like to me the age of like prior to Google, there was like all these encyclopedias and these like Wikipedia articles, and the internet was referenced by like links and stuff like that and text, to now having the ability for you to get to an answer directly. AI, for instance, allows that. We're seeing that in our data and across the board on all different doc sites, whether it's on Mintlify or not. And to us, we think it's just like the small tip of a much larger iceberg of different things in which AI is going to help augment in this particular space as well.
Very cool. Very cool. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I feel like the doc sites that do have the AI type search on them, I do use that, and it's like it's much easier to just get to the place I want, and often I don't even need to click on the sources that those docs things like link me to. It just gives me the answer straight up, you know.
And we see
So
this with
Yeah.
our own customers. Like we have a pretty active Discord community, and folks used to ask questions there and kind of expect someone else to help them. But now you can have a bot that has indexed all the docs and just answers right away, and they get exactly what they wanted within seconds, right? Without having to scrape through and read a bunch of data.
And one part of these, so first of all, that's so true. Like, I think it's almost like a very standard, that's almost coming to become a standard developer experience thing now. It's like support, it just needs to have a layer of, instead of just docs, some chat indexed on docs content, whether it's on Slack or I think in the future, increasingly more of like the support systems themselves, will need to live off of
Mm-hmm.
this content. But I think the more important thing that I think actually no one talks about, that like we have a very strong, kind of belief in ourselves, is the actually how it not only it's about like taking the content and actually distributing like that, but actually the crafting of the content and the pieces of itself. So,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, that same Discord bot that is answering, people's questions is actually also has the data on what people are asking and
Mm-hmm.
when there is a response to that question or not.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Think about the granularity of what that can also enable. So for instance, if billion people, sorry, not a billion. Like if like let's say like 20 people are asking questions like, hey, does Highlight have a Zapier integration? And all the responses are like, hey, unfortunately, we can't find anything in our docs.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? It tells you, hey, maybe, if you do have it, you should probably go update the fun content, or it's a feature request. You should
Yep.
probably go build it, right?
Yeah,
And
we wish it
so,
was a billion people asking, but but
I'm
it's
sure it
so
will be
cool
very
that
soon.
now
No
this
doubt
bot
about
can
it.
be affecting the product roadmap and driving a lot more than just answering questions, right?
Yeah. Or even alternatively, like let's imagine if you're the one answering the questions, if the bot's not covering it, it could be able to pick that up and actually go back and to feed the content itself. And so people
Yeah.
who are browsing it and having that, source of truth is going to evolve over time naturally based on feedback that wasn't just a technical writer or someone like yourselves updating the docs. I see this world where this kind of like, content is evolving naturally and automatically instead of it used to be like one person, right? One person, like a writer, the docs, a reader on a static site. But to have like five different sources of things that will either be human in the loop or not, that's going to dynamically adjust the content. And the content itself is not just going to be a static site, but it's actually going to be powering like your support, your Discord bots, and like three other things. Uh, and that's in the world of AI, I think how content and all that stuff is going to evolve. And I think for us to kind of play some role in that is kind of our vision into the future.
Yeah.
And Han, like more, I guess, prescriptively in terms of y'all's roadmap and what you're thinking about building, how do you think about your focus towards just focusing on the docs use case and making that
Yeah.
experience really, really good versus going out into these other verticals like customer support and, having
Yeah.
a bot in my Discord. And obviously
Yeah.
there are avenues for you to integrate because I think you guys use
Yeah.
Inkeep, is it, for your doc search, or maybe you used to use it? But yeah, like how do you think about integrations as well, and what's the general strategy from your perspective there?
Yeah. I think for us, we like, I'm a big believer of, first focusing on a core competency and really serving that use case well, right? Before kind of really branching into other things, right? We think there's still a lot of opportunity in just, helping this serve towards developers, which, as we've realized, is a bigger market than we thought and a growing market too, as I'm sure you guys have realized as well,
Yeah.
and are willing to kind of bet on that. But I think over time, I think we view ourselves as being more adjacent to this kind of content and source of truth layer relative to building out the entire stack, if you will. So we want to be able to help, own and help people manage the content. For instance, whether it is, a docs or a knowledge base, internal docs, or maybe even help centers. And the use case of them, you can kind of define. We just want to build a toolkit to enable this and the collaboration tooling to make it easy for you. And as far as what you want to do with the ingestion of the content from inwards or outwards, totally up to you.
Got
And
it.
so we want to take more of this integration play.
Got it. Got it. Understood.
Given all the features that you guys have been shipping, I'm curious if you have any learnings on the pricing front to share, whether you've implemented more of a basic like per seat model or if you've experimented with any usage-based sort of pricing.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good question. So it's something that's evolving, as we're experimenting and trying new things.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think that pricing is always, it needs as many iterations as the product does, right? It's like not a thing you just ever slap and then it's like you're calling it a day. It's like thing that's gonna, take a few times to get right. And as I think I've learned and chatted with more people about this, it's a thing that no one ever gets right. Like public companies will believe that they haven't had pricing figured out, right? With that being said, we are kind of this interesting, weird mix between more traditional feature bucket SaaS pricing and usage pricing, where it's like, hey, to get a certain set of features, you have to be on a paid plan. But then if the paid plan really goes above, let's say, like a huge number of pages, or your chat system is just blowing up, then we will want to scale proportionally to that. That's what we've landed on so far. But again, I like I say this, I'm sure, for folks, referencing this years down the line, I'm sure it'll be very different as well. The one insight we've had is that seats don't really work in the public doc space, unfortunately.
Hmm.
That's just one of at least my core beliefs is like imagine if you're a company who is, let's say, having like a few hundred people, and even if you have a docs team, they're not growing proportionally to the size of the company.
Hmm.
Like, like the number of people who are actually actively maintaining Stripe docs, like very actively, is less than people think. Um, and that's the nature of it. So we haven't indexed as much on that.
Interesting.
Well, one thing I'm curious about, Han, you mentioned earlier about like dog fooding, like the fact that y'all are a developer company, but you obviously have your own Mintlify docs, which Vadim and I both have taken a look at. Um, how do you think about so at Highlight, for example,
Yeah.
we're all engineers, and so we all have our own opinions on what an observability or a monitoring tool should look like, right? And so I feel like we're pretty critical with our own product and how we use our own product,
Yeah.
and those
Yeah.
types of things come up in not customer feedback, but just like when we
Yeah.
want to build a new feature or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Versus we also have some pretty large companies or even small startups that use us that might have differing opinions,
Yeah.
or not even deferring, but like just orthogonal, right? How do you
Yeah.
think about what to index on? Like, are you guys very opinionated and you're like, we are
Yeah.
building our vision
Yeah.
and leave if you're not interested? Um, or are you
Yeah.
guys more so customer obsessed and you kind of
Yeah.
have let the product uh, uh, be
Yeah. Run its
scoped to
course.
what the customers are
Yeah.
asking for?
Yeah. First of all, that's a really good question. Um, and I mean, I feel like there's the only right answer to that is somewhere in the middle, right? Like, um, I feel like for us, like in the earliest days, the value proposition was we knew what we wanted. We knew that we're a startup. And so all of our customers looked exactly like us. you know, it was
Hmm.
literally like fresh out of YC startups.
Yeah.
Some of our batch mates were like our first customers. And it was like, yeah, like we knew what we wanted. We knew, and by virtue of, that you'll assume that there's others like you.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um, and so understanding that core vision and solving your own problem, I think was always served as a great starting point. But I think at some point down the line, right, you can't always run with that because then you're only going to be able to serve customers the exact same size as you, which you can't really do as a business. Or maybe you can. I don't know. I can't think of a good example of one. But you have to start listening to them a little bit more, right? They want some more features. And I think what we've noticed is like when we started building out, it was initially just like two people founding teams for a little bit.
Yep.
And then we just listened to what they wanted. And then we swam to the Series A companies. And then we started listening to the upper bounds of some of these and started building from more towards these features. More of them came in, they gave more feedback. And then
Mm.
we got a Series B customer, you know, and then built for that. And it kept going up until, it just swam further and further upstream. And so I think that core vision of us still building for what we wanted still very much holds true to the company, um, and holding close to the DNA that got it started. But I think it's very natural for you to just listen to your customers and grow with them. And I think as their needs expand beyond what you just need yourself, you kind of, expand your scope and market as well.
Do you have any examples, Han, off the top of your head of some of those features that maybe a Series B or Series C company would want that maybe a YC fresh company wouldn't care about in their docs?
Yeah, a great example. So, and I'll even tell you one that we don't frankly use as much ourselves, but is one that customers, our larger customers do. Is for a very long time, Mintlify was it just swam in your GitHub repos,
Mm.
right? Like it was something that you just attach into your mono repo or something that you can have a docs repo for, and everything was in the CLI, and it was like your Git workflow to get things up and running. The reason we did that was because we just couldn't build an editor. Like we just knew it would take too long and it would be too hard. And we're just like, let's just run with that. And also, it turns out it's what people wanted too.
Yeah.
But once you start swimming into the 100+ people companies, you very start to realize that they're hiring technical writers who don't want to use Git and never want to even own a GitHub account, for the most part. And so at that point, we're like, oh, okay, to unlock this next stage companies, you have to build more of these like, web-based, WYSIWYG kind of like collaboration tooling that to this day, we don't use that much ourselves, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
We think we're still a few hires away from someone really kind of power using that, but it's what some of our largest customers do, right?
Sure.
And so that's I think that of many
It's a great
other
example.
examples
Yeah.
of one of the
Has anyone ever, you mentioned a little bit more on the content side, how that's kind of your focus in the near future, but I'm curious if you guys have ever thought of being an alternative to Next.js or an Astro or more like almost like a framework for building any kind of web application rather than docs.
Yeah. I think in the time to come, we will grow out of just being perceived as like a docs, service. Because core part of what we believe is it's really just a distribution of content to communicate to a user. And then we started with like a wedge of like being very developer and users developer focused, which is just docs. And so from that, we've optimized a lot on like, for instance, the API stuff. But as we kind of pull back the curtains and take a step back, we're like, okay, well, it's content, right? It's content communicating to answer someone's questions. That's like a whole breadth of products, right? Like that's like a headless CRM. That's like, that's like literally what knowledge bases are. That's like what, help centers are and all of those great things. I think as we grow, we'll eventually start to go into that, but we've stayed true to our developer focus in the meantime.
Very cool.
Makes sense.
Very cool. Han, I'm curious, like, what are things that, what's something that we can look forward to in Mintlify in the next, by the end of the year, let's say? Like, any sneak peeks you can give us in terms of just features that the audience is listening to or whatever it is?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll answer this for yourself specifically, and then I'll answer it for my customers more broadly. I think for yourself very specifically, the vision is that, we want to basically have you be able to achieve the highlights docs with quality, with taste, and with the brand aesthetic that the current docs have using Mintlify. And so we kind of believe that unless we're able to really perfect and craft this, like, Nadeem, as you mentioned, like this framework that really gets you up and running super fast without any of the hassle to whatever brand that you really have, we are only isolated to the audience that want the opinionated solution. And so a high degree of customizability while still balancing ease of use is like this perpetual thing that we're covering, right? So for instance, if Jay, I know you mentioned how like, highlight, you guys wanted really like, the branding aesthetic that you guys had in the early days. And the only way to feel like you can get that is by building it in-house. We want to make that not the case.
Got it.
That's an example. As far as general, hand wavy, exciting features go, we got some more like kind of like content writing features down the road, which is about helping you maintain the docs automatically and being able to kind of develop that alongside, your team and content. So it'll be more easy to maintain the content, as feedback comes in. That's one of a few exciting things that we'll be hoping to release by the end of the year.
Nice, good stuff. Cool. Well, okay. Before we jump off, Han, what I want to ask about is how can people keep in touch? Like, how can people learn more about you, but also Mintlify? Maybe the Mintlify answer is pretty obvious, but yeah, give us a few like resources to reach out where people can kind of get in touch.
Yeah, definitely email me directly.
Okay.
Please bug me. Like, my email is Han, HAN @mintlify.com. I literally offer this to anyone who wants to chat about this. Is like, I know managing like developer content is a really big headache for people who don't think about it all the time. Like, how do you actually write great docs? How do you actually like, make developers not confused? Don't get me wrong, I am not perfect at it. We're still figuring it out. But if this is something that you're thinking about, whether you use Mintlify or not, I don't care. In fact, probably better if you don't. you know, contact me as I would love to help. There's nothing more than I care more about than helping people build better developer experiences so that your developers and your customers can just use your product better and go and build great stuff from it. I think there's something really empowering and impactful to me in that work. And so I love doing it. So please don't be afraid to bug me or ask me anytime. And same with you, Vadim and Jay, by the way.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I mean,
No,
I feel
after
like
all we've heard now, I think we're even more excited about
I agree.
about
I agree.
the transition. So
And yeah, thanks again, Han, for being on the show. I'll
course.
share that email in the description, and then maybe also your Twitter handle and a few other things. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Han, for joining, and have a nice rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It was a ton of fun.